$5. That is the entire cost of the bucket, the scrap of cloth, and the handful of water that is about to do what a $40 bag of starter fertilizer cannot. You walk out onto your lawn on a Saturday morning, coffee in hand, and you look at that same bare patch by the driveway that has been mocking you since last spring. You bought the premium seed, you raked it in, you watered it like the bag told you to, and here you are again staring at thin, patchy, embarrassed-looking grass while your neighbor's yard looks like a golf course. The villain here is not you. The villain is the garden center aisle that sells you a 25-pound bag with a glossy label and a vague instruction to keep moist for 14 to 21 days, because that label is written to sell seed, not to grow grass. And the frustration is the part nobody talks about. You do this every single year. You spend another $60, $80, $120, and the lawn looks the same in August as it did in April. Most people are doing this the wrong way. They scatter dry seed on hard soil. They water it twice a day for a week. They give up when half of it never sprouts, and then they blame the weather. Nothing ever changes because the method never changes. So, in the next few minutes, I am going to show you exactly why your seed is failing before it even touches the dirt. I am going to split this into two completely different problems most homeowners confuse for one, and at the very end, I am going to show you the Amish soaking sack method. That is the entire reason this video exists. The trick that wakes seed up roughly 4 to 7 days faster than anything sold in a store. But before any of that, ask yourself one quiet question. Are you sure the seed you threw down last spring ever actually germinated, or did most of it just sit there and rot? Part 1 is the problem almost every homeowner has, and almost no homeowner names correctly, and that is dormant seed. Seed that looks fine, gets watered, and simply refuses to wake up. This matters first because you can do everything else right, the soil, the timing, the fertilizer, and still lose 60% of your bag to seeds that never broke open. Here is what you instinctively do. You tear the bag, you walk the patch, you fling the seed by hand or with a little hand crank spreader, you rake it in lightly, you turn on the sprinkler for 10 minutes, and you walk away feeling like you did the job. It feels logical, it even feels satisfying. But beneath your feet, something very specific is going wrong. A grass seed is a sealed package. Kentucky bluegrass takes 14 to 30 days to germinate from dry. Tall fescue takes 7 to 12. Perennial ryegrass is the fast one at 5 to 10. Those numbers on the bag assume the seed coat absorbs water slowly from the soil, swells, cracks, and then pushes a root down. The problem is that 10 minutes of sprinkler water wets the top quarter-inch of your soil, and then the sun bakes it dry by 11 in the morning. The seed gets a sip, swells halfway, dries out, and that half swell kills a huge chunk of the batch. The mechanical consequence is brutal. You paid for a bag rated at 85% germination, and you are realistically getting 30. Here is the reframe. You are not growing seed. You are babysitting a seed coat, and that coat needs to stay wet for 36 to 48 straight hours before it ever touches your soil. So here is the correct sequence. Simplest first. Step 1, before you scatter anything, soak your seed. Take the amount you plan to spread, dump it into a clean 5-gallon bucket, and cover it with lukewarm water by about 2 inches above the seed line. Let it sit for 24 hours for ryegrass and fescue, up to 48 for bluegrass. That single step alone cuts your germination window roughly in half and pushes your real-world germination rate up towards 70 or 80%. Step 2, before you spread, scratch the soil, not rake. Scratch. You want the top quarter-inch of dirt broken up so the swollen seed falls into a little pocket instead of sitting on a hard crust. A cheap steel garden rake, $15, dragged in 2 directions, is all you need. Step 3. After you spread the wet seed, cover it with 1/4 inch of screened topsoil or peat moss. No more. People bury seed an inch deep and wonder why nothing comes up. Grass seed buried more than 1/2 inch will exhaust its energy reserve before the shoot reaches sunlight and die in the dirt. Step 4. Water in short cycles, not long ones. 3 minutes, 4 times a day for the first 10 days. Long watering pushes the seed sideways and downward and drowns the seedlings. What you stand to lose if you skip this is not just the seed. You lose the whole spring. You lose 6 to 8 weeks of growing season waiting to see if anything fills in, and by the time you admit it failed, it is July, the soil is 110 degrees on the surface, and nothing new will germinate until September. One universal prevention tip before we move on: never seed when daytime soil temperature is above 75 degrees Fahrenheit, because the seed coat will cook before it cracks. If this is the kind of thing nobody tells you in the garden aisle, take 2 seconds right now and hit subscribe, because every video on this channel is built exactly like this. The mechanism first and the marketing second. One click and you are in. Now, part 2 is a completely different problem. And I want to be very clear, this is not the same issue as dormant seed. This is what happens after the seed wakes up and starts to fight for its life. The thesis is simple. Most people kill their new grass not by underwatering, but by underprotecting. Here is the universal mistake. You get germination, you see that beautiful green haze across the patch around day 8, you feel like a hero, and then 10 days later, half of it is yellow, thin, and flopped over. What happened is that you exposed brand new seedlings with root systems shorter than a fingernail to wind, direct sun, foot traffic, and the chemical burn of regular fertilizer. The catastrophic consequence is that those baby blades shrivel from the tip down, the roots cannot pull water fast enough to replace what the sun is taking, and within 2 weeks you are looking at a brown patch that will not bounce back until you start the entire process over in the fall. That is a 4-month penalty for one mistake. So here are the methods. Cheapest first. Method 1, straw mulch. The old method that still beats almost everything sold in plastic bags. 1 bale of clean wheat straw, about $8 at a farm supply store, covers roughly 500 square feet at the right thickness. The right thickness is the one most people get wrong. You want to see roughly 50% of the soil through the straw, not 0%. A solid blanket of straw blocks sunlight from the seedlings, and they grow tall, pale, and weak, reaching for the light. A scattered cover, half soil visible, half straw visible, drops soil surface temperature by 10 to 15 degrees, cuts evaporation by about 70%, and stops raindrops from blasting seed out of position. The mechanism is humidity. Straw traps a thin pocket of moist air right at the soil surface, which is exactly the microclimate a seed coat needs. Method 2, peat moss top dressing, the method for the homeowner who hates the look of straw on a front lawn. A 3 cubic foot bale runs you about $15 and covers about 100 square feet at a 1/4 inch depth. You spread it with the back of a leaf rake, gently, until it looks like a light dusting of dark chocolate. Peat moss holds up to 20 times its weight in water, releases it slowly over 48 to 72 hours, and acidifies the top layer of soil just slightly, which most lawns in the United States and the United Kingdom actually need because their topsoil has drifted alkaline from years of tap water irrigation. It works because it is a sponge sitting directly on top of your seed, and that sponge does not let the seed coat dry out between waterings. Method 3, the one a professional reaches for, hydro mulch in a bag, sometimes sold as paper pellet mulch or green-dyed cellulose mulch, about $35 to $50 for a 40-pound bag that covers roughly 200 square feet. You spread it dry, you water it once, it swells into a green crust, and that crust holds moisture for up to 4 times longer than bare soil. It also sticks to slopes, which straw will not. If you are seeding a hillside or any patch where water runs off in a storm, this is the only one of the 3 that will not slide downhill in the first heavy rain. The reason the pros use it is that it is the only cover that survives a 40-mile-an-hour wind, and your bare seed on an open suburban lawn is dealing with exactly that kind of wind every single afternoon in April. Part 3, prevention. This is the master move, the one I sealed up at the start, the Amish soaking sack method, and now I am going to explain it the way it should have been explained on the back of every seed bag ever sold. Take a clean cotton flour sack, a pillowcase, or a square of burlap. Pour your dry seed into it. Tie the top loosely. Submerge the whole sack in a 5-gallon bucket of cool water and let it sit for exactly 24 hours for fescue and ryegrass, 36 for bluegrass. Then lift the sack out, let it drip for 2 minutes over the bucket, and walk it straight to your patch. You will spread damp, swollen, pre-activated seed by hand, sprinkling it like you are salting a steak. Then cover with that 1/4 inch of topsoil and water normally. The mechanism is pure biology. A seed coat needs to absorb about 40% of its own weight in water before the embryo inside switches on. In dry soil, that takes 7 to 14 days of careful watering, and during every dry afternoon in that window, the seed slides backward and loses a little of what it gained. In the sack, the seed sits in constant contact with water for a full day, hits that 40% threshold in one unbroken push, and arrives at your soil already in stage 2 of germination. That is why you see green in 4 days instead of 10. The material is nothing exotic, a $5 cotton sack and a $5 bucket, and the application is 1 bucket, 1 night, 1 morning of spreading. Every year you do this, you save roughly $40 in wasted seed from the bag you used to throw down at 30% germination. You save about 3 weeks of waiting, and you save yourself the second trip to the garden center in June when you give up and start over. So which one is for you? If you have a small front yard under 1,000 square feet, you have a flat lawn, and you have a garden hose you can move every couple of hours, the soaking sack plus a light peat moss top dressing is the entire system, $20 total, and you will be mowing new grass in 3 weeks. If you have a larger property, a quarter acre or more, with open exposure and wind, do the soaking sack and then cover with straw at that half and half visibility ratio, because at scale, straw is the cheapest blanket per square foot you can buy. If you are dealing with a slope, a new construction lot with bare graded dirt, or a patch the dog tore up next to a downspout, do the soaking sack and then lay hydromulch over the top, because that is the only combination that survives runoff. In all 3 cases, the sack is the constant, the cover changes with the property. Now here is the next problem you are going to run into the second this works, and it always works. About 4 to 6 weeks after your new grass is up and looking thick, you are going to notice broadleaf weeds, clover, and the occasional crabgrass shoot pushing up right through your beautiful new turf, because freshly seeded soil is also the most welcoming bed in the world for every weed seed. The wind has been depositing on your yard for the last 3 years. You cannot spray a standard weed killer on new grass under 8 weeks old, or you will kill the entire patch you just grew. And that is the trap most homeowners fall into next. If that is the problem waiting for you, drop the word weeds in the comments below and tell me whether your invader is broadleaf or grassy, because the next video is going to walk you through the exact safe sequence for killing weeds in brand new turf without losing a single blade of the grass you just worked so hard to grow. Hit the subscribe button now so that video lands in front of you the day it goes live, because if you are seeding this season, you are going to need it within the month. That is the whole method. The sack, the bucket, the cover, the timing. Use it once and you will never throw dry seed on dry dirt again. Before you close this video and head out to the shed, let me give you a few more pieces of this puzzle that the Amish families I learned from drilled into me over the course of 3 separate visits, because these are the details that separate a yard that fills in halfway from a yard that fills in completely edge to edge with no thin spots and no bare patches staring back at you in October. The first detail is the water itself, not the amount, the temperature. When Eli Stoltzfus, the older gentleman who first showed me the burlap sack trick back in the spring of 2019, filled his soaking bucket, he pulled the water from a rain barrel that had been sitting in the shade of the barn since the previous Tuesday. He told me in that flat Pennsylvania Dutch cadence that cold well water shocks the seed and slows the swelling by almost a full day. Rainwater that has been sitting at ambient temperature, somewhere between 58 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit, wakes the seed up without stunning it. If you only have a garden hose, fill your bucket the night before and let it sit on the porch overnight. That one change, free of charge, will shave somewhere between 18 and 30 hours off your germination window. I have timed it with a notebook on 3 separate test strips in my own backyard, and the rainwater strip was always up first every single time. If this is the kind of detail that changes everything about how you approach your lawn, there is an entire system built around exactly this thinking, and I want to tell you where you can go deeper. Everything I learned across those 3 visits, the sack method, the soil preparation, the timing windows, the water temperature rules, all of it is written out in full in the Amish Lawn Guide and the Amish Soil Guide. And if you want every principle in one place, the Complete Amish Yard Field Edition puts it all together in a single reference you can take outside with you. All 3 are available for $97, and the link is in the description below. This is not a general gardening book. It is the specific system these families have been using on the same land for over 150 years, and it is the only reason I stopped wasting money at the garden center every spring. Now let's get back to protecting that seed once it wakes up, because germination is only half the battle. The second detail is the sack material. Real burlap, the kind that used to come wrapped around coffee beans and feed grain, has a weave of roughly 10 threads per inch and a fiber that swells when wet, which traps moisture against the seed coat the entire ride from bucket to ground. The plastic mesh bags that onions and oranges come in at the grocery store will not work. I tried it. The seed dries out within 4 hours because the mesh holes are too large and the plastic does not hold any water itself. If you cannot find a real burlap coffee sack, a cotton pillowcase, the cheap kind from a thrift store for $1.50 will get you about 80% of the way there. It is not as good, but it will still beat dry broadcasting by a country mile. The third detail, and this is the one almost nobody talks about, is the calendar. The Amish in Lancaster County have been seeding cool season grasses, mostly Kentucky bluegrass blends, and tall fescue on the same windows for over 150 years, going back to the original Anabaptist settlements in the 1760s when these families brought European pasture management practices across the Atlantic. Their rule is simple. Spring seeding goes down when the soil temperature at 4 inches deep holds at 55 degrees for 5 consecutive mornings. Fall seeding goes down exactly 8 weeks before the average first frost in your county. Not 6, not 10, 8. You can look up your first frost date on any extension office website in under 30 seconds, mark the calendar, count backward 56 days, and that is your window. Seed outside that window, and even the soaking sack method will only get you partial results because you are fighting the soil itself, not the seed. The fourth detail is what you do not do. You do not fertilize at the time of seeding. I know every bag at the home improvement store tells you to use starter fertilizer, and I know the man in the orange apron will look at you like you have lost your mind when you walk past it. The Amish do not use it, and their lawns and pastures are thicker than anything I've ever seen come out of a suburban subdivision. The reason is that high phosphorus starter fertilizer feeds the weed seeds in the soil just as aggressively as it feeds your grass seed. And since the weeds germinate faster than the grass by roughly 4 to 6 days, you are essentially handing the weeds a head start with a buffet attached.